Hello again. Here we are. I got my friend Yoda here. He made some tea for me, and we're going to look at chapter 3, probably verse 22 to the end. And this is the last time that we see John the Baptist in John's Gospel. So, in the other Gospels, we hear about John being put into prison, and then we hear about his death by the hand of Salome. Herodias's daughter with trouble with Herod. We don't hear that in John's gospel, but we do hear the fact that John was put into prison. So there's a little connection there with the other gospels. But we'll take a look at that. Verse 22, after this, Jesus and his disciples went out into the Judean countryside, where he spent some time with them and baptized. So we assume that where Jesus was talking to Nicodemus was in Jerusalem because he had cleansed the temple, and then Nicodemus came to him at night, even though it doesn't say that was the place, although it just is a continuous flow. So here Jesus is getting outside of Jerusalem into the countryside. Jesus kind of does that. He makes some big splashes in the big city, and then he withdraws. So it's kind of an ebb and flow, probably for protection, and doesn't want to get into the spotlight too much. So they're in the countryside, and it says that they baptized. It doesn't say exactly, well, it says he spent time with them and baptized. So we don't know if it's just Jesus baptizing or if the disciples are baptizing here. But this is different than the other three Gospels. We don't hear about Jesus baptizing any disciples. But here there's this overlapping ministry with John the Baptist ministry. So, and that sort of sets the tone for the rest of this end of the chapter here. So verse 23, now John also was baptizing at Aenon near Salim because there was plenty of water and people were constantly coming to be baptized. The telling us that there's plenty of water is a very John thing to do. A little bit later, when Jesus feeds the 5,000, he'll say, people sat down because there was plenty of grass around. So that's kind of a funny little thing he does. But John has kind of moved up the Jordan River closer to the Sea of Galilee, because when Jesus got baptized, we were told that he was near Bethany, near closer to the Dead Sea. So John's moving up and a little closer to where Jesus is. And it says in verse, it says people were constantly coming to be baptized. So we're not sure if that was with John or with Jesus there, but it references John. So John's ministry is still active and growing. And then verse 24. This was before John was put in prison. So there's the aside to the fact that of the other stories where John's put in prison and then killed later. We don't hear any more about that. We just hear this piece. Verse 25, an argument developed between some of John's disciples and a certain Jew over the matter of ceremonial washing. So there's a problem there. And other translations say purification. There was some debate over purification. And it's hard to know exactly what was going on between regular Jewish purification rites and baptism and how those two are connected. Maybe some other commentators know more than I do, but I don't really know if there's a strong connection between those two and why John is doing what he's doing. He just seems to come out of the blue. And like I said, someone else might know more. And if you know more, let me know. But there's a dispute, and some translations say the Jews. There was a dispute between Jews and John's disciples, because John usually refers to any people who are questioning either Jesus or John as the Jews. But here it's singular, I think, in the Greek text. So there's a dispute here. And verse 26, they came to John and said to him, Rabbi, that man that was with you on the other side of the Jordan, the one you testified about, well, he is baptizing and everyone is going to him. So here we have this little rivalry between John's disciples and Jesus' ministry here. And it's no fun. John was kind of the main man here, and now, Jesus is eclipsing him. And John, told us that was going to happen earlier. He said, I'm just the one setting this up here, but apparently John's disciples needed to hear it again. To this, John replied, "A man can only receive what is given from heaven." And this is kind of a double entendre. I think it's a general statement that, everything that happens sort of happens for a reason. That's kind of what he's saying. But he's also referring to Jesus, right, coming down from heaven. Verse 28, "You yourselves can testify that I said, I am not the Christ." So here John refers back to chapter 1 for us. Or is that, I'm sorry, chapter 2, right? No, chapter 1. That's where John was. Sorry, just blanking on that. But I am sent ahead of him. So he reiterates what was in chapter 1. And then he says, "The bride belongs to the bridegroom. The friend who attends the bridegroom waits and listens for him and is full of joy when he hears the bridegroom's voice. That joy is mine, and it is now complete." And here John is setting this image of the bride and bridegroom. Jesus is the groom, right? And, this gets further developed, taking a lot of themes out of Isaiah, this wedding feast out of Isaiah. And then as we look towards Revelation, we see that the end of Revelation is this wedding between, New Jerusalem coming out of heaven, adorned like a bride for her husband. And there's the Lamb, Christ in the middle of it all, being married to his people. So that's sort of the culmination of it. And this is the in-between where John's taking these Isaiah images and setting up Jesus to be the groom. And we are the bride. So this is the kind of the first place this begins to happen. Jesus uses a lot of parables and bride and bridegroom images as well. And here John's doing it. So he sets himself up to be the bridegroom's friend, right? When he hears his voice, he rejoices, and he applies it to Jesus now. Now that he's here, I rejoice, right? He must become greater, and I must become less. That's verse 30. And so John sets up this, teaching to his own disciples about his own, not value, but his own authority, right? Once Jesus is here, John's authority wanes, and then Jesus is going to take over. He's just the setup man. And John reiterates that through this bride and bridegroom image, and bridegroom's friend, or the best man, or whatever you want. Verse 31, "The one who comes from above is above all. The one who comes from the earth belongs to the earth and speaks as one from the earth. The one who comes from heaven is above all." So here John is comparing himself as one of the earth to Jesus, who is the Word who came down from heaven in chapter 1 again, those echoes of that. And the word earth here is, I think it's gi, they pronounce it. It's not, cosmos was used for the world before. Cosmos is a much bigger kind of sense of things when they use that world. Here it's earth, an actual planet, as a spatial, this place, right? John comes from this place, the earth. Verse 32, "He testifies to what he has seen and heard, but no one accepts his testimony." And here he's referring to the testimony of the one who came down from heaven. So he's speaking about Jesus' own testimony. And here it's interesting. I read in my commentary, we're not certain about whose voice this is in verse 31. It could be John, the narrator's own voice, or it could be John the Baptist's voice. So you can kind of think of which one it sounds like. Verse 32, I said he testifies what he's seen and heard, right? This is talking about the one who came down from heaven. And it echoes chapter 1, where it said he came to his own, but his own did not know him. Verse 33, "The man who has accepted this has certified that God is truthful." So it kind of contradicts that no one has accepted his testimony. And then he says, "The one who has accepted it," so sort of hyperbole of verse 32. The one who has accepted is certified that God is truthful. John may be referring to himself as the one who's accepting it. Verse 34, for the one who God has sent speaks the words of God, for God gives the Spirit without limit. So here, John introduces the Spirit again, that is the testifier, right? John is giving testimony, right? That's a big word in the gospel here. And the Spirit also testifies. And Jesus refers to this later, that, he can testify to himself, and the Spirit gives that same testimony. He doesn't need a human testimony, even though he has John's. So he doesn't need any other human testimony. So this is a lot of interesting little theological bits that John is playing with here that we got to kind of just chew through. Verse 35, the Father loves the Son, has placed everything in his hand. So kind of the Father and Son image coming out of chapter 1, which was the Word was God, with God and was God. Here it's put into this relationship of Father and Son. And then verse 36, leading to belief and trust. Whoever believes in the Son has eternal life, but whoever rejects the Son will not see life, for God's wrath remains on him. So this sounds a lot like chapter 3, verse 17 and 18, where it says, God didn't come to condemn the world, but whoever does not believe is already condemned. So it's that kind of echo of this relationship between, if you believe, you have life, but if you don't believe, you're condemned. And that seems to be the dualism of John here. And that kind of does it for the end of chapter 3. We will pick up chapter 4 with the Samaritan woman, the woman at the well. And just a beautiful story where this meeting Jesus happens. I really love that. And thanks for listening to this little last piece of John the Baptist.